All right, so we'll get started. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to New Hampshire Peace Action's Justice Conversation Series online for August 26th of 2024. I'm Jeremy Love, National Field Organizer of Back from the Brink. In a previous life, I served on the boards of National Peace Action and New Hampshire Peace Action, and currently represent New Hampshire Peace Action on the steering committee of Back from the Brink. Tonight, we're so happy to welcome Professor Hiro Miyazaki and excited for his talk on city and citizen diplomacy for nuclear disarmament, re-imaging its impact. New Hampshire Peace Action educates, mobilizes, and organizes to build a more peaceful and just future for all. We envision a future where international relations are based on cooperation instead of competition and conflict, and where mutual benefit and shared security lead to a more peaceful and just global community. In the spirit of understanding and respect, we'd like to take a moment now to acknowledge that we're doing our work here in New Hampshire on the traditional ancestral homeland of the Abenaki, Pennacook, and Wabanaki peoples, past and present. We acknowledge and honor with gratitude the land and waterways that they have been stewarding throughout the generations. Just a quick reminder on Zoom guidelines. We're happy to have you keep your videos on with so we can see your faces and feel connected. We will keep your audio muted for now. You can use the chat feature to share reactions and ask questions that we'll get into in the second half of the program. We'll also call on folks to speak later. So now, let me introduce tonight's speaker and program. Hirokazu Miyazaki is the K. Davis Professor of Anthropology at Northwestern University. He also serves as professor at Hiroshima University and as Nagasaki Peace Correspondent. Hiro's research has long been driven by a very simple question: how do we keep hope alive? He's studied land issues in Fiji, financial markets in Tokyo, and Hiroshima and Nagasaki's global efforts for the elimination of nuclear weapons. His current research focuses on civic activism surrounding the uses of nuclear power. Miyazaki is also the author or editor of several books. Many city and town leaders around the world, mayors, city council members, and local residents are currently deeply engaged in addressing global challenges such as climate change, migration, and pandemics. What role can they play in addressing the escalating threats and dangers posed by nuclear weapons? The mayors of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, in close collaboration with hibakusha and local peace activists, have led a vigorous global campaign for nuclear disarmament since the 1980s. Likewise, numerous U.S. city councils, in coordination with local activists and nuclear frontline communities, have adopted various resolutions and ordinances related to nuclear weapons. This presentation, based on Professor Miyazaki's ongoing research project on the role of cities in the politics of nuclear weapons, offers some preliminary observations on the impact of these local actions by local government leaders and those they represent. So our presentation will be about 30 minutes long, and then we'll make time for robust discussion and Q&A. And with that, I give the microphone to Professor Miyazaki. Thanks again for being here with us today.
Thank you, Amy and Jeremy, for your kind invitation and introduction. I thank you, everyone, for attending this event. I really appreciate you finding time to be with me this evening. So first, I would like to acknowledge that the Northwestern University campus sits on the traditional homelands of the people of the Council of Three Fires, the Ojibwe, the Potawatomi, and Odawa, as well as the Menominee, Miami, and Ho-Chunk nations. And relatedly, I'd like to acknowledge that my research is situated in a myriad of other specific relationships, my friendships with hibakusha and peace activists from Hiroshima and Nagasaki, as well as Marshallese, downwinders, and other affected communities in this country, and many peace activists like you across the country. And I really thank all of you for your support and a willingness to work with me on my work, activism, and research. So this August, the mayors and governors of Hiroshima and Nagasaki again called on world leaders to prioritize nuclear disarmament and peacemaking through annual commemorations. And city leaders around the world, including many U.S. city leaders, are deeply engaged in addressing global challenges such as climate change, migration, and refugee crisis and pandemics, but they are reluctant generally to engage in security and defense policies, such as nuclear weapons policy. And I think it is time for US city leaders to follow the lead of the leaders of Hiroshima and Nagasaki and become more proactive in preventing the imminent threat of nuclear war. And in fact, approximately 80 US cities and towns, as well as 6 states, have passed resolutions calling on the US federal government to prioritize nuclear disarmament. And at least by our count 51 of these resolutions explicitly support and draw on the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, TPNW, as a framework for their own stance on nuclear weapons, with many calling on the federal government to sign the treaty. Although the US is probably unlikely to sign the treaty anytime soon, in my view, the treaty does provide a perfect platform for them, these city leaders, to represent the voices of many Americans who are deeply concerned about the dangers of nuclear war and the harm already caused by nuclear weapons in this country and elsewhere. So for the last almost a year or so, I've been traveling across the country to meet with city leaders and activists who have worked hard to pass resolutions on nuclear disarmament through city councils and state legislatures. And let me share my slides. And this project is funded with a grant from the Carnegie Corporation of New York, and my presentation has been prepared in collaboration with a graduate student at Northwestern, Nisaito, from the sociology department. Let's see. So, as you know, there are multiple campaigns, national and international campaigns, to introduce resolutions, city level and state level resolutions. And most notably, back from the Brink campaign, Jeremy is working with, has enabled 80, more than 80 resolutions to be passed in US cities and towns. And in coordination with the Back from the Brink, also an international campaign to abolish nuclear weapons, also has an international campaign called I Can Cities Appeal. And under that campaign, through that campaign, New York City and other cities have passed resolutions. And there are also several quite significant independent resolutions passed in places like Spokane, Washington, Walla Walla, Washington, and Skokie, near where I live. And most common justifications cited in these resolutions for cities to weigh in on issues like nuclear weapons policy include the TPNW and bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and also most commonly financial costs of funding nuclear weapons development. And one kind of quite obvious, but also somewhat unexpected finding I'd like to share with you is the fact that these resolutions are serving as very interesting documents of local nuclear legacies across the country. So many resolutions include references to historical ties to the Manhattan Project. For example, Chicago Resolution mentions the University of Chicago's role in the Manhattan Project, as well as the disproportionate impact nuclear weapons development has had on economically disadvantaged populations, it's particularly African Americans in the city. And Portland resolution also discusses Hanford Nuclear Reservation, Hanford site, and its downriver impact on the Columbia River. And other resolutions reference local populations of affected from local populations that have been affected by nuclear weapons development. For example, Spokane resolution mentions Spokane tribe of Indians, Hartford downwinders, and as well as local Marshallese community. And also other resolutions talk about other past and present ongoing anti-nuclear campaigns, like Nuclear Free Zone campaign, Nuclear Freeze campaign, Mayors for Peace campaign, and also specific individuals who have worked really hard to promote the importance of nuclear abolition. So one important finding, and also I would like to make, is that these resolutions, although they are largely symbolic, they also contain elements that lead to the city's more prominent role through TPNW platform. As you can see, some of these nuclear legacies directly speak to particularly Articles 6 and 7 of the treaty concerning humanitarian and environmental consequences of nuclear weapons development. So one thing as a team we are arguing is that these resolutions will offer opportunities for city leaders to actually participate more actively in the international, global, and very inclusive platform that TPNW has created through these local legacies, these resolutions mention. And in fact, I would say that the city leaders of these cities where resolutions have been passed have a moral and political obligation and a mandate to represent many Americans living in their cities concerned about dangers of nuclear weapons, as well as the specific harm caused by nuclear weapons in their city territory, within the city boundaries, as well as those from communities affected by nuclear weapons development. So we are kind of calling on city leaders, mayors, and city council officials, city council members, and city officials to join the mayors of Hiroshima and Nagasaki to go to the states bodies, meetings of the states bodies to the TPNW next March in New York, and raise their voice for the elimination of nuclear weapons, and also call on the federal government and international community to address the enormous harm already caused by nuclear weapons. And I can talk more specifically about specific resolutions, but I would like to say one more thing about our project. Our project is called Mapping Nuclear Legacies. Through these resolutions, this website, Mapping Nuclear Legacies, will be launched in the next 2 weeks. So I will let you know when that happens, and we would like to invite you to participate in enriching our site by contributing your news from your activities and city councils and any follow-up activities that have happened or may happen after the resolutions are passed. And so each city has a dedicated page, and we were going to assemble a group of essays, short essays about the legacies, nuclear legacies specific to each city. And our goal is to really amplify the impact of the resolutions through the kind of locally specific contents that they have. So when this website is launched, I will let you know. Once again, I invite you to help us enrich this website. And another thing I would like to talk about is related to this project, and also overall focus on city-to-city partnerships for the abolition of nuclear weapons, is a new initiative within the Catholic Church. I've been helping develop this new partnership for World Without Nuclear Weapons, launched by 4 dioceses across the Pacific: Hiroshima, Nagasaki, Santa Fe, and Seattle. Originally, this was proposed by Archbishop Wester of Santa Fe, who has been very vocal about nuclear abolition within and also outside the church. And I'm sure many of you have heard him speak. And this partnership is really importantly anchored in 3 principles that Pope Francis called moral imperatives that can open the path to peace: remembering, journeying together, and protecting. And I'm mentioning this partnership not because I am sort of assisting the further expansion of this partnership, but also this partnership really contains within itself a kind of sort of orientation that speaks to the kind of work I feel is needed in anti-nuclear activism in this country and elsewhere. And that leads me to the final point about hope, my favorite subject. I think nuclear weapons issue really presents a really difficult challenge to our capacity to hope. On the one hand, we know what would happen to us and to our planet if one of thousands of nuclear warheads were actually detonated. And the prospect of nuclear winter really makes it almost impossible to imagine where to find hope for our collective future. On the other hand, we are also acutely aware of what nuclear weapons have already done to us and to our planet. And of course, I have in mind here, especially the victims of the atomic bombings in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and the health consequences to survivors, downwinders, and Native Americans. But also, in a way, we were all affected by the presence of nuclear weapons in this country. And so we need to work together to realize nuclear justice for all of us, particularly those for whom harm has not been duly acknowledged and recognized. But I also see a disconnect in terms of the orientations between these two visions of uh, the necessity need to abolish nuclear weapons. On the one hand, we have nuclear winter. On the other hand, we have all these nuclear justice issues stemming from the harm that has already been done. And also there are lots of points of contention and disconnect between them, and one of the points of disconnect is perhaps the issue of the nuclear power, the civilian use of nuclear power, and from many native tribal communities that have been affected by uranium mining, there is no difference between them. And from their perspective, uranium should be better left. It should be left in the ground. But so the only thing I think we can possibly kind of see hope on horizon is and somehow bring these two perspectives together. This long-standing activism driven by fear of this possible future that is nuclear winter, and also, but at the same time, also the kind of long overdue, longing for justice on the harm already done. So in my observation, as I study these resolutions and people who are energized to work on these resolutions, and also particularly after speaking to many younger generations of activists, and in the current moment, in the current movement, is not necessarily driven entirely by fear, but actually largely driven by the pursuit of justice and right relationships. Right relationships here mean relationships with those who have been already affected by nuclear weapons. But also, I would like to say that the right relationships between those who have long been committed to this cause, who've been really pushing this movement forward to this point, and younger generations, so intergenerational right relationships, and also finally the relationships between those who are committed to eliminating nuclear weapons on the basis of the fear of nuclear winter, and those who are pursuing justice for the harm done to them in the present, in the past, and also the ongoing harm they are suffering from. So where is the hope? And I think hope is always in relationship building. And that's where we foster trust, mutual trust, and across differences of all kinds. And perhaps if we take a little bit more time and effort to candidly recognize the different experiences that have brought us to this place, even if our activism takes a little bit more time and is less clearly oriented towards a specific policy goal. And I hope as we kind of advance our activism in our respective places, I hope we'll be able to foster the right relationship in each encounter, and small and big, and I just can't really see any other place where we can find hope again to re-energize our collective commitment to nuclear elimination as well as to nuclear justice. And only through right relationships, I am learning from this study, through this study, that we may be able to eliminate nuclear weapons eventually. And after all, nuclear weapons stand for this unacceptable resignation of mutual distrust as the condition of human life. Only way to counter that pervasive culture of distrust, we need to re-energize and our faith in the power of trust and exchange. And that's the only place I think we can rediscover and rediscover hope. And in fact, in our relationship making, hope indeed springs eternal. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Hiro. Really appreciate the presentation. I saw McGregor just applauding. I just want to comment that it's really a pleasure for me, knowing a lot of you and having seen you all, to see you guys show up for this event tonight. So it fills me with joy to see folks like Bill and Sandra on the call, McGregor, Chris Hansen, Barb, who's not on camera, and a lot of other friendly names. So thank you so much for turning out tonight. We're going to open it up for discussion and questions. And I'd like to give, folks an opportunity to get on the mic and actually sort of pose the question to Hiro or myself, if I can be helpful. So Douglas, you put a question in the chat, and I'd like to welcome you to ask the question out loud if you'd like. And I should note that it's inspired a healthy little sub discussion about nuclear power, but I think your question is a good one. So please ask away.
Going back to, I'll basically read what I posted. I attended a seminar with one of the regional watershed organizations where the featured speaker was declaring that nuclear power was the solution to our energy crisis with to avoid climate change from burning fossil fuels. And I raised a number of objections, and he absolutely poo-pooed them all. I still don't think we've achieved a secure way of storing nuclear waste. And as I said in the post, there was the risk of that to the health of the indigenous communities around the mining, not just from the mining, but from the transport of the material through their territory. And this expert's answer was the cancer rate of the indigenous miners was due to the fact that they were smoking in the mines. So given that Bill McKibben and James Hansen are both backing off a bit on their anti-nuclear stance, because I believe they see burning fossil fuels as leading into an uncontrollable situation, and that they are not denying risk from nuclear power, but they feel that we could have more control over it. I'll stop there. Then I realized the discussion here was about weapons and not nuclear power. But I don't know how you separate the industries.
Yeah, Douglas, if I could just jump in, because the question that you posed in the chat was actually sort of really well worded. So the question is how do you make a distinction between extraction and the processing of uranium as part of the supposed solution to sort of climate change versus the danger that nuclear energy and fuel extraction presents within the context of nuclear weapons. So, like, how do you sort of connect those two, or what do you think sort of are the kind of tacit problems and implications of those two things sort of dovetailing with one another?
I think the corporations are the same. I don't think there
Oh, and
is
they,
much of a distinction at the top.
yeah, well, they there might be, but let's give Hiro a chance to jump in on that.
Yeah, I think there could be kind of various positions on this issue, and I think coming from um, my research in Japan, where both nuclear detonations and nuclear power plant accidents took place. So there are, even in Japan, there are debates about the relationship between the two. As I was growing up, was I was not really taught much about nuclear weapons, but I was really my social studies classes were always filled with um, defense of nuclear power. And so, people in my generation really believed in peaceful use of nuclear power, etc., until Fukushima accident took place. And it's easy to say that these are separate issues or these are deeply connected issues. It's also easy to say that in order to advance a cause like elimination of nuclear weapons, we need to just focus on nuclear weapons, just set aside nuclear energy and nuclear power, nuclear energy. So there are many positions, and these positions will reflect different experiences and historical um, legacies. And I think only thing I like to say here is not so much um, stating my own position on the relations between the two issues, as to suggest that we actually really need to listen to each other. I mean, oftentimes these two camps or multiple camps do not necessarily speak to each other. And these days, they are, I've observed, I witnessed many contentious conversations between those who strongly advocate for nuclear weapons abolition, just focusing on nuclear weapons, and those who strongly advocate that these two issues cannot be separated from each other. And they don't have the language to use to speak to each other and listen to each other. And I think the first we really need to start to listen to each other, where these positions come from. And one way or another, all nuclear issues are really long term. We can't solve either peaceful or military uses of power tomorrow. And both produce nuclear waste that has to go somewhere, that we need to contain and manage. And even the decommissioning of nuclear power plants takes years, if not hundreds of years. So we actually, there's a big community of people who are interested in nuclear things, nuclear, and I think there ought to be more mutually trust generating conversation across differences. So that's the only thing I like to say in this context.
Thanks, Hiro. That sounds like a ringing endorsement for the Compassionate Listening Project to me. That 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 we could use more compassionate listening to each other so that we can understand sort of where we're coming from and reach consensus a little more easily. So I really appreciate that response. And Douglas, I hope that gives you a little more sort of context on that. I have a couple of questions that I kind of preloaded within myself for Hero, but I do want to give everyone an opportunity to get in. So if you have a question, please feel free to use the functionality of Zoom to raise your hand, and we'll call on you and you can ask a question just on the air, or you can pose a question to have it read out in the chat. Or I'm happy to jump in with one of my questions, but I'll pause for a minute and give anybody who wants to raise their hand or other Oh, Lenore.
I was having trouble with my computer throughout, and one of the problems was raising my hand. But in any case, thank you for calling on me. Earlier on, unfortunately, I couldn't get the sound working so that I could hear. So forgive me if I am repeating things that have already been said. But I want to thank you for doing this. And on the issue that just came up, I do have some thoughts on this. We're facing right now the insanity of NATO, US pushing war upon war upon war. I think the last I heard was a three-front war being proposed: the Ukraine, Russia, the operations against China, and I think the Middle East. They're talking about maybe using tactical nukes against Iran. So we're really up against it in terms of the crisis that humanity is facing. Given that, number one, I would say that I think that a unity of the peace movement internationally in big numbers is really required against nuclear war, against nuclear arms. So that's number one. And number two is that if we can get that established, talk about compassion. If we have compassion and the ability to have a dialogue with other nations, I am absolutely convinced that almost all nations on the face of this earth do not want to be destroyed. So I think that has to be number one priority. On the nuclear energy issue, just very, very quickly, from what I have looked at, and friends of mine in places like South Africa, other parts of the world which are really highly undeveloped. The continent of Africa, if you look at it at night, doesn't have hardly any lights. People, I forget what this friend of mine said, I think it's like 80% of the population throughout the continent has no energy. They are using dung to cook and so on. That kind of situation means death to these populations. It means mass death, and that's part of what some people would like. I think that, we need to look at advancing nuclear energy and improving the technologies and moving to fusion, which probably could have been possible 30 years ago if it had been funded. I think we really need to look at nuclear energy from the standpoint of stopping the annihilation of people through poverty. So I just wanted to put that out there, but really the total thrust from my standpoint is we must stop the push for thermonuclear war. And we must all pull together, no matter what our differences on other things might be, to be able to be out in the streets, out, talking to our congressmen. I missed the part on what is being done with the city leaders. I think this is important, but I did miss what was said. So I guess I have a statement more than a question. My question is, how do we mobilize the entire world against nuclear war? I guess I can pose that as a question. Thank you very much.
Thanks for that, Lenore. I'm gonna jump in before Hiro has a chance to make remarks and suggest that we focus on the United States and not the world currently. The grass is greener where we can tend it, and we can tend it here, and there's plenty to do right here in the United States to get our leaders on board with the work that we're doing. And it's not to say that the global work isn't necessary, but again, there are things that we could be doing right here in New Hampshire, which I could use help with. Like we had a meeting with Pappas. Actually, Barb, who's on this call, was in that meeting. And I'm sad to report that almost a year later, we haven't even gotten a thumbs up or thumbs down on HRES 77, which is the Back from the Brink bill that we've built 44 co-sponsors for in the House. And neither of our reps from New Hampshire are on that bill as co-sponsors. So, as needed as this is for a global movement, there are things right here in our state and right here in this country that we can be doing to get the global leader in military spending to change the course of direction and strategy and posture on nuclear weapons. So I don't mean for this, Lenore, to be dismissive of your suggestion that this is a global operation, but I just want to draw attention to the fact that there are things that need attention right here in the United States and things right here in New Hampshire that advocates who are working to resist the prevalence of nuclear weapons and our reliance on the strategy that nuclear weapons backs up, just right here in the state. So, Hiro, I'll let you respond if you've got comments too.
I thank you for all these questions and comments. I really appreciate the issues that have been raised about nuclear weapons and the nuclear threat, and also nuclear energy. Jeremy, I agree that there's a lot to do in this country and each state and each city. But I also we would like to encourage cities and city leaders to also represent many Americans who are concerned about the imminent threat of nuclear warfare and also the harm already done to local populations at UN, within a kind of UN framework as well. And I think that would, even though the US is not going to sign the treaty on the prohibition of nuclear weapons anytime soon, within the very open or a kind of inclusive framework of TPNW, city leaders can participate and represent all of us and in that setting. And I think that would make a powerful appeal to our national leaders as well.
Thanks, Hiro. So I've got Moji next in the up for a question.
Hi. Hello. Thank you for doing this. And hello, Professor Miyazaki. Thank you for what you're doing. I am from Iran, and Lenore mentioned that the global nature of this issue. To bring this home, my ancestral home, where I have a lot of family in Iran, is Natanz, where Iran's main enrichment facility is located. Therefore, my own family is threatened by Israeli nuclear threats. So the issue is global and local. I am here in Boulder, Colorado. And so thank you for drawing attention to this, because for the past 25, 30 years, I've been trying to reason, if you will, with fellow Iranians that this nuclear enrichment facility is something that is poisonous. And yesterday, I was listening to one young, so-called youngish person from inside Iran who was talking about that he was thanking Benjamin Netanyahu for slaughtering people in Gaza because he said we need a war. And so these issues are so deeply interconnected globally, and but they manifest locally. So I agree with Brother Jeremy. And in order to bring people together so that we can have in-depth, compassionate conversation and develop a language. Earlier you said, Dr. Miyazaki, about we don't have a language to so that the people who are against nuclear energy and who are against nuclear weapons can speak to one another. So in order to develop that, we as peace activists, human rights activists, anti-nuclear activists, democracy activists, we need to be a lot more effective and work together. So I have this project called Chambers of Compassion, endorsed by Noam Chomsky and other luminaries. And I just sent the information in it about it to in the chat. My question is, especially with you, Professor Miyazaki, how can we get people to different tribes of, if you will, tribes of activism to recognize that we really need to work systemically together in the same way that chambers of commerce systemically work with one another. Therefore, we see how destructive and how huge their success is. How can we do that? Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you for your really thoughtful comment. I really appreciate what you said. And I think you're really right that all of the challenges we are facing today are all interconnected, locally manifesting, and so that is interesting. That presents an interesting opportunity for us to work across scales, across levels of government, and across borders as well. And I think this is something that has come up in the Partnership for a World Without Nuclear Weapons I'm involved in. So Archbishop Westrop Santa Fe recently said that knowledge or information is not enough. We have to move people's hearts. And I think that's actually quite, I mean, I thought I was quite moved by that observation. And yes, education is important. More information is necessary for people to understand what is at stake in nuclear weapons as well as nuclear energy. But that's probably not enough to bring people together so that they can work together for a better future. I think so. That's why I like all of us to focus on listening to each other and sort of have and commit ourselves to have at times uncomfortable conversations across differences. And this is not just just being nice to each other. I think we just need to let us be moved by others who can have a opinion that is contrary to ours. So that's, and I mean, I really am always overwhelmed with nuclear weapons or nuclear energy related issues, and I just, it's really hard to find hope and not only the issues that they pose, but also in the movement itself. I'm part of. So, and I really strong feeling about the necessity for us to constantly reminding ourselves that we really actually need to start to just listen to each other and let ourselves be moved by others. And that's the only way we can resolve a whole series of issues, including nuclear weapons and nuclear energy related issues. And that may not lead to clear-cut policy position, but after all, we cannot really have a universal really solution to our global issues. We just have to work together towards something perhaps incomplete and imperfect, but by working together alongside with people whose values are not entirely same as ours, itself perhaps produces more peaceful future.
Thanks for that, Hiro. Yeah, something that you just said really hit home for me. And I'm trying to practice this more in the advocacy work that I do, but also just in my personal life, that we often get caught up in letting perfection getting in the way of progress. And, even though these conversations can be hard to find sort of common ground with folks with, that is, as long as you're being patient, showing grace, and being willing to have that conversation, that is a step in the right direction. Having these conversations is just the important first step towards coming to a solution on these problems. So we've got about 7 minutes left. We've got 2 more hands up. Hollis, your turn to ask a question.
Hey, thank you very much, Jeremy. Thank you, Hiro, for your presentation and for coming to Spokane. And we're looking forward to meeting with you again. Thank you, Moji, for talking about the Chambers of Compassion. I think that's an important idea. But I just would like to say I am involved with the Veterans for Peace Depleted Uranium Cluster Munitions and Landmines Working Group. And we are working on several things, one of which you should know about is going to come up September 1 through 7. We are trying to deliver letters to every nuclear weapons manufacturer or part supplier or anybody who's involved in the genocide in Gaza to let them know they no longer have a corporate shield preventing their indictment for crimes against humanity and war crimes. Because The Hague produced that information way back in World War II. And so we are trying to go ahead and install a campaign to let these guys know that they, as individuals, are indictable for their actions in genocide. And but on another thing, I want to just say we have a psychological issue here in our country, and we are afraid of the other, and the other is constantly out there, and these guys are creating hatred and fear of the other, and this is abolishing the hope that we have for eliminating nuclear weapons. And I would encourage anyone here to read Atomic Days. It's called Atomic Days by Joshua Frank, and he'll tell you all about what's going on at the Hanford Nuclear Reach, where they are trying to now install 12 small modular reactors to produce energy, which these things are just as expensive and just as toxic as the big ones, and they're harder to deal with. They haven't even been proven yet. No one's been built one of these things. So that's an important issue. He'll tell you all about the history of nuclear weapons. Also, if you have not gone to the Los Alamos Study Group, where the U.S. is trying to, the Department of Energy is trying to store more and more toxic high-level nuclear waste in New Mexico and transport it across long distances, then you need to get in touch with these guys down there at Los Alamos Study Group. New Mexico is being turned into a nuclear waste dump and a nuclear waste production facility for new plutonium pits. And it's horrible. We also are in touch with Ground Zero, which is where the nuclear Trident subs are over in Seattle, Washington, 20 miles west of Seattle. That's a horrible site. Go to Ground Zero and find out what they're doing. And we're also in touch with the Global Network Against Nuclear Power in Space. And these guys are trying to put nuclear weapons in space to blow up other satellites and other nuclear weapons in space. These guys they've gone rogue. They're nuts. And that's why we have to go against the Pentagame and the Pentagon. And it's going to take international pressure to do this. We can't be in our little silos anymore. We're going to have to do exactly what Hiro said. We're going to have to connect. We have to make the connection. That's spiritual. That is cosmic. And getting close to the end here, we're also working with World Beyond War. We're working with Diffuse Nuclear War. We're working with San Clemente Green and even the Mothers, Mothers for Peace in San Luis Obispo. They've got a great campaign going too. So we have to get connected. So just remember this, Warheads to Windmills is doing something from the 16th through the 21st on banning nukes and nuclear weapons, nuclear power. And 27 through 28, it'll be looking at the fossil fuel industry. So I know I've taken a lot of time, but I want to get this through. Jung talks about we've got to ask these guys to stand down, and they have to do it now. They must stand down, and otherwise they're just going to keep going. They would rather commit suicide than give up their winning power. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Hollis. Chris, can you get your question in quick? Yeah, go ahead.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Okay. One of the most hopeful things that I remember in the last decade was the fact that we and several other countries, including Russia, established a treaty with Iran to limit development of their nuclear weapons programs. And I think that I'm thinking of this as a hopeful event, although it was trashed by Trump when he had the chance. But the hopefulness in your presentation that we should find ways to rely on hope instead of only making people fearful about the issue. I think that's really important. And are there instances of diplomacy being developed that need more publicity, more attention? Because we so often focus on the failures and the violence of the consequences, but we need to also to show the hopeful things, and among other things, bring back the nuclear deal with Iran. But are there other hopeful diplomatic efforts or successes that we can point to in terms of getting other countries to sign the TPNW and so on?
Thank you. Thank you, Chris, for that comment. I think, so I focus on city diplomacy, and I think city diplomacy is a hopeful thing. And we need more of that in the defense and security field, as mayors of Hiroshima and Nagasaki have done over the last 40 years. And I'd like to encourage you as city leaders to work with peace activists like you more actively to call on nation states to work on nuclear disarmament and eventual nuclear abolition. And I think it's very important to have kind of multilateral negotiation on the level at the level of nation states. But I think now that we have a really solid track record and climate-related negotiations among city leaders involving NGOs, I think we could also imagine something similar for nuclear disarmament as well. So I like to kind of encourage city leaders to do more in this area. And I also want to kind of thank Hollis for those comments and announcements. And I really appreciate all you do up in Spokane. And I really appreciate Veterans for Peace Spokane chapter. It's been very vibrant and energetic and moving city government forward always. It's one of the model case, I would say. So thank you.
Awesome. All right. Well, that brings us to a little past the top of the hour. Amy, I'm sorry for running over, but I wanted to give Chris a chance to talk. So we're going to wrap this up. Many thanks to Hiro for presenting and answering questions with us tonight, and for all of you who came to be a part of our conversation. You can stay in touch with New Hampshire Peace Action by checking us out at newhampshirepeaceaction.org and by looking us up on our Facebook page for more information about what we're working on and what's next in our programming. The next conversation will be in 2 weeks. That's on Monday, September 9th, 7 to 8 p.m. on Zoom, featuring Joe Gerson from the Campaign for Peace, Disarmament, and Common Security with his introduction to U.S.-Chinese relations. You can also join New Hampshire Peace Action for, excuse me, for Ceasefire Now Vigils for Peace. The upcoming schedule is Wednesday, August 28th, 2 to 3 p.m. Vigil at Rep. Pappas's office at 660 Central Ave in Dover, New Hampshire. Then there's another one Thursday, August 29th, noon to 1 p.m. City Plaza in Concord. And then Wednesday, September 4th, 2 to 3 p.m. at Senator Shaheen's office, 340 Central Ave in Dover. Then there's another, I totally misordered these, Amy. On Thursday, September 12th at 7 p.m., New Hampshire Peace Action and 350 NH will be holding a direct candidate engagement bird dog training via Zoom, led by Elizabeth Bialowski, former youth coordinator at 350 NH and current New Hampshire Peace Action board member. And also to put in your calendars, Wednesday, September 24th, 7 p.m. Eastern, Organizing for Peace and Urging Congressional Action, a Mother's Day 5 pretrial update on Zoom. And Sunday, October 13th, noon, New Hampshire Peace Action's fall fundraiser at the Dairyfield Restaurant in Manchester, featuring Zoom speakers from Combatants for Peace. So this series will remain free and open to everyone. However, we deeply appreciate any financial support you can give so that we can keep doing this work. To donate, you can go to newhampshirepeaceaction.org/donate. And I hope everyone has a great night, and I look forward to seeing all of your friendly and loving faces again soon. Thanks so much for being here with us tonight.
Thank you.
Peace and be well, everyone.